This video is going to show you 12 methods that you can incorporate into your designs to make them more creative and enable you to become the best designer possible. And also there's going to be a test at the end, so try and pay attention. Number 1 is to introduce unexpected elements to break visual monotony. Now this can be used in so many different ways, but for a second, just imagine you're designing a skincare product package design. Now you can incorporate abstract artistic illustrations alongside realistic product imagery. The unexpected abstract illustrations or graphic styles bring an element of creativity and uniqueness to the packaging itself, and this makes it stand out on the shelf, and also it conveys a blend of artistry and product benefits. This psychological effect can be used in many different ways, however. It can be used also to set brands apart from the competition, or to make potentially boring or bland designs stand out and be interesting. Psychological effect number 2 is cognitive dissonance. Now this psychological technique aims to purposely create tension and conflict in a design. So as a prime example, we can have an image of a cigarette with the appearance of a lit fuse at the very end, and this suggests an impending explosion. Now the juxtaposition of a smoking-related object with an explosive element creates cognitive dissonance. This is where the viewers are prompted to confront the potential harm of smoking, and this invokes discomfort and also encourages the reconsideration of this habit. And here's another striking way that cognitive dissonance can be used, but can you identify it on the design in just a few seconds? Now the next method is truly a powerful tool for graphic designers. It's often used to create positive associations, engage audiences, and convey messages in a memorable way. And of course, this is humor. This project uses humor mixed with pop culture, and it does that to hit a message home to the audience, to you. And that's Hulk Smash wasn't effective this time. Humor is strategically used to evoke positive emotions, engage the audience, and leave a lasting impression on the viewer. And this, of course, will be memorable and positive to that viewer. And of course, great for the brand. Something similar to humor is called the halo effect. Now, the halo effect, it aims to create a positive and a favorable impression simply by using design elements. Take, for example, a user interface for a travel agency website. To incorporate the halo effect, you could add in high quality and aspirational images of exotic destinations. By simply showcasing stunning images of dream destinations, the website creates the halo effect. Users might associate the visual appeal with the quality of the travel services offered by the agency, and this generates a positive overall impression and a likelihood for future sales. Another prime example could be that on a menu design. The use of elegant typography and visually appealing food images contributes to the halo effect. Diners might perceive the sophistication and quality of the menu items based on the overall aesthetic appeal of the design itself, and then move on to attribute that quality to the restaurant. The halo effect leads the viewer to see the entire design and then subsequently the business or brand in a positive light. And before we continue our journey on learning these psychological techniques, I want to show you or introduce you to a friend of the channel. It's someone you might even follow right here on YouTube, and that is Bring Your Own Laptop and Daniel Scott. Now Daniel is a graphic designer but also a certified Adobe instructor, and to date he's helped over 1 million students learn creative skills. We're talking about Illustrator, Photoshop, Figma, Webflow, and a lot more. With Bring Your Own Laptop, you get to learn and work at your own pace, and might I add, with no ads. But also you get some awesome cheat sheets as well. There are also live streams, design challenges, and Q&As on a regular basis. And for a limited time, you can join the Bring Your Own Laptop community just for $1 a month, or $60 for your first year, which is a $24 saving. Now you can use my link in the description box below to lock in your savings, and you can kick off 2024 with a creative flair. But now we're going to head back to those psychological techniques that are so useful to us graphic designers. Psychological technique number 5 is serial position effect. Now this relates to how people have a tendency to remember things at the start of a list, the primary, and then at the recency of a list, at the bottom of the list. But we can use this on graphic designs, and here's how. If you're creating a poster for a community event, you might want to feature event details, dates, and venue information at the very top or the bottom of the poster. Attendees are more likely to recall event specifics if they are presented prominently at the beginning or at the end of the poster. This enhances the effectiveness of the design in conveying essential information, especially at the foot of the design. And this is because where people normally finish their journey around the design. Number 6 is to play around with the color saturation in terms of psychology. Now, as a quick example that you really will understand very well, let's look at making a brand identity. So reducing the saturation of a brand's primary color could be an aspect of the entire rebrand, and here's why. By desaturating the primary color, the designer creates a more subdued and a more sophisticated visual identity. This can convey a sense of maturity and elegance, making the brand appear more refined and appealing to the broader audience. Increasing the saturation, however, would make a brand more loud, more modern, and maybe appeal to a younger market. But this saturation theory can be applied to pretty much any design out there, not just branding. The 7th important psychological technique is using analogous colors, but in a certain way. The analogous color scheme we can use might be soft greens and blues, and combining analogous colors like muted greens and blues creates a tranquil and serene atmosphere, aligning with the relaxation theme of a spa. This color scheme evokes a sense of calmness and rejuvenation, making it visually appealing for potential spa clients. Here, by selecting analogous colors, graphic designers don't only make a design that looks good, but also one that has visual harmony and also evokes a certain emotion. And those emotions are cohesive to a theme or a brand identity, which is very important. Color theory does go far deeper than this, however, and you can find out more about it in previous videos on my channel. Next up, we have the art of using movement or flow as a psychological technique. Now take a look at this design right here. I'm sure you can easily see visual movement and flow on the design from the top to the hand and then down to the bottom. Really simple, right? And then this design here, we have a more complex movement, but it's still quite simple actually. It also doesn't really have much of a purpose apart from to look good. But the way that we want to use movement and flow as an advanced designer is to take our viewers on a real journey through our designs and finish at an end goal. Movement and flow is essential in almost every single graphic design, some more than others. Without proper use of movement and flow, your design will be confusing to audiences and they won't be able to get the message effectively or navigate across your design. And so basically, your design will end up being pretty useless. And that's not good for your client or for you. Interestingly, this is something AI can't actually comprehend at the moment, so let's take a look at it. There are many ways that designers can apply movement and flow onto their designs. And the first method we're going to look at here is directional line or directional design elements. The use of diagonal lines, curves, or other design elements can guide the viewer's eye through the design, and this creates a sense of movement and also direction. On this design, notice how from the top right, the body of the subject gradually moves into the center and then down to the bottom left. But if you've also got a keen eye for design, you'll notice how the typography of Genji is slanted in the exact same direction or the movement of the design. And this simply complements the flow of the design. Even the sword moves along this directional plane. The flow or the movement here is of a slight diagonal from top right to bottom left, and that's mainly because of the shape of the document itself. Notice how narrow and tall it actually is. But if we bring up this design here, consider the shape of the document and then consider the movement or the flow of the design on it. And by the way, I absolutely love this style of graphic design. I could pretty much look at it for hours and hours. But anyway, this canvas or document is more square than the previous design, and so the designer has adopted a different sense of movement and flow in regard to the directional assets. We see typography behind the focal point kind of trailing horizontally, and that is matched with the head literally gazing in the same direction. And then we see other typography elements also communicate that horizontal style too. So yeah, basically, a lot of the movement and flow on a graphic design should initially be dictated by the kind of dimensions of the document you're working on. But then here, we can see movement and flow being used in a slightly different way. A lot of movement and flow is created via the white space, among other principles. And on this design, we start off with a radial balance and a focal point of the moon. The white space around the main content allows for the viewer to then move on to the next thing, and at the very bottom here we have an expanse of darkness which kind of draws us in. There's a really neat laid out set of information here which has nice amounts of macro and micro white space around it, and that allows the viewer to easily absorb the information and then move on to the next thing when they're finished. And this is where more principles blend into movement and flow, because proximity has been used to group everything on the left into one section, and then everything on the right as a different section. Again, a nice amount of white space around it so the audience or the viewer can navigate it pretty easily. Now, this next thing is pretty clever. Most speakers of English read from left to right, and so we finish with the bright graphic on the right, and then move diagonally down to the left where another bright graphic is. The designer has used emphasis in brightness to usher us in this way. And after we've read or dealt with the information, we finally move down to the finishing point here. The ninth method is something largely overlooked by designers. By incorporating elements that align with natural biorhythms, graphic designers can create designs that not only look visually appealing but also connect with the audience on a deeper level. And that's by considering their natural patterns of activity and engagement. Imagine designing the user interface for a fitness app. You might want to incorporate dynamic imagery and colors for that high energy time of the day. Tailoring the app's interface to match users' energy levels during specific times of the day can enhance engagement. For example, using vibrant and energetic colors in the morning and transitioning to calmer tones in the evening aligns with their user biorhythm, and this can create a visually supportive experience. Another emotion that designers use is the sense of fear, and this can be useful because it can actually evoke urgency on specific designs. This could apply to safety signage in a workplace as a great example. And you can use bold typography and stark visuals to communicate potential hazards. Graphic designers can use fear-inducing elements to convey the seriousness of safety warnings. The bold typography and the stark visuals alert individuals to potential dangers, creating a sense of urgency to follow safety protocols. There are plenty of ways that designers can use fear to create a sense of urgency, from being informative to consumerist in style. For the next psychological technique, take a look at this design right here. It's pretty simple, isn't it? And what is this design telling you without any words? It's sending a message that ice cream can make people gain weight. But then what about this design here? The message here is vastly more complex, yet at the same time quite subtle. According to the design team at Cinder Media Lab, the grayscale rose provides a visual metaphor for the fragmentary nature of memory. And yes, we have looked at visual metaphors before on this channel, but they are so powerful and so useful from a psychological point of view that I do have to add it in today's video for graphic design psychology techniques. Why is this such a good approach, I hear you cry? Well, firstly, it provides instant communication of your design's message to the audience, and that's in a snap of a finger. So here for Nescafe, we see a very simple yet highly effective design. The message is as follows: coffee wakes you up and gets your behind out of bed in the mornings. Simple. And you get this message within a mere 1 or 2 seconds just looking at the design by itself. But after the initial message has been conveyed, we also notice steam and the actual texture of the coffee, and this will trigger the attention or interest of coffee lovers the world over. Also, notice how, going back to the 3 principles from earlier, the design is ultra simple, which allows for the message to be delivered to us as viewers very quickly. That plays right into the principle of clarity and simplicity. Now here's one of the most powerful advantages of using visual metaphors in your graphic design work. Basically, they kind of traverse all cultural or language barriers. Visual symbols often have universal meanings that transcend language barriers, as you can see on this poster right here. Now, I don't speak Spanish, but I know exactly what the message of this design is through the simple act of storytelling and narrative-driven design. And that is, of course, via the use of metaphors. Metaphors are also highly memorable to audiences, and so they're sort of like a superpower for graphic designers who know how to use them, but importantly also when to use them. Next up, we have a very clever technique known as empathy bias. Empathy bias can be used on almost any audience in different ways. For example, creating a flyer for a local community event can use empathy bias. As a designer, you might want to aim to understand the local community and the local culture, and then bring that out with empathy. You might incorporate familiar visuals and language, and thus the flyer creates a connection that encourages community members to participate and feel a sense of belonging. Now, here's another way that empathy bias can be used, which is pretty vastly different. If you're designing something for a charity, you might want to showcase real stories and use relatable images or individuals impacted by that cause. And in doing so, the designer taps into the empathy bias. This connection prompts viewers to empathize with those in need, fostering a stronger emotional response and increasing the likelihood of support. So now, it's time to test your knowledge and if you've been paying attention throughout the video, because we're going to look at some real examples and see which of the principles we just looked at are on these designs. So we'll start off today's questions quite easy. And here a design for Duracell batteries. So which of the main psychological techniques has been used on this design? I'm sure if you take a close look, it probably is quite obvious to you. And yeah, it is obviously humor. Humor makes a design more memorable and more relatable to the audience, and in this example here, I think it's pretty effective. So design number 2, and really on this design there are 2 main techniques being used that we looked at in today's course video. But can you determine what they might be? The likely more obvious technique is empathy bias, and that's because we see imagery of children and doves, and this relates back to the cause or the message of this design. It aims to create an empathic response in the audience. But what about this second technique? Now you might notice that the large hand extends left to right, and then naturally you would move down to the text below. This is an example of the designer using movement and flow, so kudos to you if you got that one correct. There is also a small case to be made for serial position effect, and that's because we have information at the bottom. But let's look at the next test design. So here's a design promoting Queen Salon. I will give you 3 effects discussed in today's video, but which one do you think is most relevant here? 1. Biorhythms, 2. Cognitive dissonance, or 3. The halo effect. So which of these 3 applies to this design the most in your opinion? The answer here is the halo effect, but do you know why? Well, the halo effect in graphic design refers to the cognitive bias, where a positive impression from aspects of the design leads viewers to perceive the entire composition and brand a higher standard of appreciation, trust, and fondness. So we see serif fonts, luxurious high-end clothing, flower arranging, and chic minimal design. The entire design screams luxury, and this plays into the narrative and the halo effect, which the target audience will appeal to of this design. And finally, for today's short test on this course content, which of the 12 psychological techniques has been used on this design right here? Well, when we're looking at this design, I'm pretty sure most people don't get a sense of peace or relaxation, and that's because the designer wanted to convey a sense of conflict and tension. The model's facial expression is one of extreme stress, and then we have harsh contrasting colors which just furthers the conflict. Also, we have some harsh lettering at the bottom, and all of this is cognitive dissonance. So, hopefully you got some of those correct, but if not, maybe just rewatch the video again at some point and remind yourself of these techniques. But if you want to learn yet more graphic design skills, just click that video on screen. But until next time guys, design your future today. Peace.